Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Pies, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and this is part 2 of the training camp battles to monitor for fantasy football in 2025. Part 1 was stacked with some major battles that are worth discussing. You got Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. You got the Cleveland quarterback room. You got the Cowboys running back room. You got the Chargers running back room. There's some big ones. I think we discussed maybe 8 or 9, and this one also has about 8 that we want to discuss that are super important because they can change the aspect of your entire fantasy football season. These picks, the discussions that we're going to have around these players will affect fantasy drafts moving forward. And guys, climbing ADP drafts, as well as like guys you probably need to stay away from. I mean, training camp is a huge thing for NFL teams to find the guys they want to play week in and week out. And we're going to discuss through it all. So we're really excited to do that. But before we do that, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation. Justin, I'm doing good, man. We got some football on Thursday. We got a couple weekends of football, and then hopefully it'll lead into our fantasy drafts there. And so I'm so excited for this season, Justin. But a lot of these training camp battles are going to play into how we draft this year, Justin. So thankfully, guys, make sure to schedule your drafts kind of towards the end of August because you never know what's going to happen.
No, I completely. That's some really great advice. We strategically planned our draft the day after preseason ends. So week 3 of preseason ends on, I believe, the 23rd of August. Our draft is the 24th. If you decide you want to do it the weekend after, I'll do it the day before the draft. I mean, the day before the season starts, the day the season starts. There's 2 weekends in between that, so you have time. But I agree, do it before or do it after the preseason ends, so we don't have to worry about injuries that happen throughout training camp. I mean, for example, obviously none of these so far through the first 3 or 4 days are season-ending injuries or stuff like that, but Joe Mixon is expected to miss some time with the foot injury during training camp. Justin Jefferson had a hamstring injury. Justin Fields hurt his toe, dislocated his toe, I believe, but nothing broke, and now he's actually even back 2 days later, so he's good. Traylon Burks, unfortunately, broke his collarbone today, so injuries like that happen. Make sure you schedule your drafts after that so you don't unfortunately have that scenario where we used to do it years ago. We used to have our draft early August, maybe even late July sometimes, just maybe for excitement. And I don't know, we were all there and around in person. But I've had players like Dobbins hurt himself in a preseason game, be out for the season. Same for Jerick McKinnon. Stuff like that happens to everybody. So don't plan your draft and have the unlucky scenario where that happens. But anyway, let's dive into these training camp battles that are really important to discuss. We'll start here with the Los Angeles Chargers wide receiver 2 battle here. Obviously, you got Ladd McConkey as the prime target for Justin Herbert, but next you got Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, and you have Quentin Johnston in his 3rd season out of TCU. Obviously, year 1 for QJ was really, really bad. Last year, he fixed that, sorta, with a bunch of touchdowns. I believe he had, 10 last year, so he was a touchdown magnet last year. Still struggled with some drops. The unfortunate thing is we've seen more struggles with these drops in training camp already. I've already seen 3 different videos of him dropping passes. So I'll start us off here. I really think Trey Harris is that guy. He's a big wide receiver, and although we haven't seen anything from him yet, I think that the Ole Miss pedigree, obviously, of recent, we had DK Metcalf, AJ Brown be really good. I know you can throw in Jonathan Mingo as a bad example, but I think Trey Harris resembles them more, and Trey Harris had better stats at Ole Miss than both DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. I believe he led all of Ole Miss wide receivers and receiving yards in his tenure there. So I'm a big fan of Trey Harris this year, and I think he's going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Chargers.
Yeah, Justin, it's really tough to say how this is going to go down, really. For me, I like Trey Harris, but I like the progress that Quentin Johnston made from year 1 to year 2. He actually caught 8 touchdowns, 711 yards, but with 55 catches there, Justin, I think that he is clear-cut the second guy there under Ladd McConkey, and I feel like, since he was able to prove himself from year 1 to year 2, I do like it from year 2 to year 3. I think that Herbert's going to be more improved. I think this offense is going to be more intact there, more on rhythm there with Harbaugh's second year as the head coach. So I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston there. I just think that now he's going for that 1,000 yards, and he can definitely get 10 touchdowns.
Yeah, you make very valid points there. Obviously, he has first round pedigree, so he is we saw bad year one, but he did improve a lot in year two, and I think Harbaugh does believe in him. I think something worth noting is the rumor mill around. Obviously, we saw Mike Williams retire, so they brought him in because they wanted more wide receivers in that room. Well, there's another former Chargers wide receiver that's currently a free agent, and that is Keenan Allen. There's interest on the Keenan Allen side of it. He always said at going into this offseason, he said, I either want to go back to Chicago or play for the Chargers. So I'm pretty sure Chicago is not going to call him back. I do think the Chargers could. So that would throw a wrench into these things. But I have Harris. You have QJ. Let's move to the next battle, and that's RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins for the running back one role for the Denver Broncos, which obviously the last couple of years has not been a valuable piece. But Sean Payton in the past with the Saints had some seriously great seasons with running backs. Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush, I believe, too. So we've had some really good years by Saints running backs under Sean Payton. It hasn't happened in Denver, but there's some optimism this year as RJ Harvey was an absolute beast in college at Central Florida, and J.K. Dobbins just had a revitalization of a career last year with the Chargers. What do you think is going to play out between these two?
Justin, I like RJ Harvey, to be honest there. I think that with J.K. Dobbins, he's going to be good, but unfortunately he's very injury prone there, Justin, and I'm very concerned. In fact, a player that you haven't mentioned yet, who I'm still holding on to, is Audric Estime. Out of Notre Dame. I think this is going to be a second year. I really liked him coming out of college, and I'm a little disappointed that Sean Payton didn't get him as much as involved last year. But you know what, Justin? I think that this is RJ Harvey's backfield. And you know what? I'm going to take it a step further and say that he's probably going to end up as one of the best rookie running backs this year. I think that J.K. Dobbins will have some flashes, but I think that he might get pushed to the back. And maybe Audric Estime has some room to be a really good number two guy. Not a guy that you're starting every week, but a guy that you may consider a handcuff, actually. No one's going to be drafting this guy, but I do think he's going to be a waiver wire pickup probably around after week 2, week 3-ish. I think that RJ Harvey, this is his backfield. He's going to win it. I think he's going to be really good. And you mentioned all these guys that, Sean Payton has. They're not the most flashiest guys. Like, yes, he had Reggie Bush, but no one really saw Kamara coming. No one really saw Pierre Thomas and all these other guys. Obviously, Mark Ingram was a standout at Alabama, former Heisman Trophy winner, and he was able to make that work. But regardless, I think that he's going to go with a direction with that's going to gear to favoring the younger running backs, right? J.K. Dobbins has had 2 or 3 really serious injuries in the last 4 to 5 seasons, and I think it's really tough to depend on him. Sean Payton is a really kind of rough head coach offensively, and I feel like I don't think he's going to be J.K. is not going to be able to handle this momentum that this offense is on going from last year with Bo Nix in his rookie year. So I feel like it's RJ Harvey, number one for sure, clear cut. And then right behind him, I think Audric Estime has some room in this offense to shine as well.
Really? I'm interested on your Audric Estime take. I think that I don't see it happening. I think that's why they brought in JK. That's my take on it. I do think that this is going to be a split early on. I think that JK, obviously, in training camp has started with the ones, but I do think RJ Harvey will supplant him, especially behind this top 2 offensive line in PFF. They are rated as the second best offensive line. So I think last year, obviously, Bo Nix had to throw it more because they couldn't rely on the running game. This year, it's going to be a better balance between passing and running the football. I will say, J.K. Dobbins currently going at RB40. He was going at RB40, literally the same ADP last year, and obviously became what he became. And they brought him in for a reason. I do think Harvey is the better running back, and he was picked in the second round. And when he got picked, I think a lot of people were shocked and somewhat disappointed. They were like, "Oh my gosh, Caleb Johnson was on the board, Cam Scatabo was on the board." Like there were some other pieces still there that they didn't go with, and they decided to go with RJ Harvey. So I think that they really believe in him, and I do think he is going to be that guy, and I think he's actually going to provide really good value. Where he's going at RB21, which is in the 6th round of your draft, and I think it's well worth the pickup for a guy who had 6.8 yards a carry last year at UCF, 22 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving touchdowns. So he ended the year with 25 touchdowns. Really solid. So he is a workhorse back, even though he is somewhat smaller, like compared to guys like Caleb Johnson or Cam Scatterbu, and the fact that he's not like built. He's under 200 pounds. He's 5'8". So he gives a little bit of a smaller vibe. But you know who also gave a little bit of a smaller vibe that a lot of people were doubting last year? His name is Bucky Irving. I was a doubter. I was like, he's a smaller back. I don't see him demanding that workload. And he was able to do the exact opposite of what I was predicting. And so I'm not going to be wrong twice. And I think Harvey will step up, and we will finally see a good Sean Payton running back return. And it'll be Harvey this year. So I agree. I think it is Harvey. I think Dobbins will offer solid value. I don't think it'll be 20 plus carries for Harvey every week, at least not for the first 8 to 10 weeks. I think Dobbins will command somewhat of a workload, but I think it'll be a healthy split between the two, with Harvey being the lead back. We'll move to the next debate here, and it is Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson. What do you think between these two running backs?
Justin, I still have a little faith in Ramondre Stevenson. I think he ended the season kind of rough there. He had somewhat of a fumbling issue. There was a couple fumbles that I saw that weren't recovered by opposing NFL defenses, but they were still fumbles, right, Justin? I mean, even though the offensive line or whoever it was would recover it, it was still something just like you want to believe in Ramondre. You want to, draft one of the best couple. You want to draft in the first couple rounds. Receivers, so you can wait to the third or fourth round and get guys like Ramondre Stevenson. That's what I saw a lot last year. And for the most part, that's something that worked. But I feel like Ramondre will be good up until week 8. Week 8, week 9. And I do think that Trayvon Henderson, Justin, is actually going to end up starting the season just a little slow, just a little bit. Week 2, week 3, I think that maybe some people might drop him. But then from then on, Justin, I want to say he's going to be a league winner. In fact, I'm going to go on and say that Trayvon Henderson will have championship performances in the fantasy playoffs that will win you your fantasy championship. I just feel it. It's going to take him a little bit. He's one of those late bloomers, Justin, where some people might drop him, but then week 4, week 5, he has that one random road game where he just kills it. And then next thing you know, he becomes a starter. And you know what, Justin? I want to say week 16, week 17, he will help a lot of people win fantasy championships or help get them to the championship if not winning it. And I like Trayvon Henderson. I think he's going to work in his offense.
I completely agree with you there. Ramondre's fumbling problems, and another plus for Henderson is actually how good he is at pass blocking. I think he is going to be on the field a lot more often, and even early. I think weeks 1, 2, and 3, I think it might be slow, but I think that he's already establishing himself as the more reliable running back in this running back room. And obviously, he went to Ohio State, and he was an absolute baller. He can catch the rock. He is absolutely electrifying in the receiving game as a running back. So I think that he's a value. I think he's a great pick at where he's going in drafts right now. And yes, I think he is a league winner, as you mentioned. I think he is going to be a guy on championship teams. And if you're unwilling to draft him, currently he's going, I believe, in the 6th round of drafts right now, and you want to maybe wait and offer trades to the owner in week 2 or 3, and maybe, he's had a couple poor performances where he's not being utilized a lot, and you want to throw out a trade to try to get him on the cheaper, that's fine. I think it's obviously more risky because maybe the owner is like, oh, I listened to the Dween Sports podcast, and I know I need to wait a few weeks for Travion Henderson to step up. But I think that's a possibility that you could look into. But I do think Henderson's a great pick, regardless of it. I think he's going to step into this backfield and be the guy. And I know some people are doubting him because Mike Vrabel's history in Tennessee was big Derrick Henry, giving a lot of touches to that big running back. And obviously Stevenson is the bigger back. And I think early on and maybe throughout the season, he is the goal line back. But I think obviously the Titans that's kind of an anomaly. He was gifted the biggest, most dominant running back in probably NFL history in Derrick Henry. Obviously these are two very different running backs, and I know Stevenson's a bigger back, but I don't think Vrabel is just going to rely on, he's the bigger back, so I'm going to give him that kind of workload. So give me Henderson everywhere. As for Stevenson, I don't know if I really love picking him even where he's going. I just think that he's not long for a solid, sustainable workload with this team. And I bet they move on from him next year and try to look elsewhere. And even then, another thing to point out, last year with Stevenson, with the fumbling issues and the efficiency issues, they were taking him out for Antonio Gibson, who everybody's like, oh, wow, he even plays for the Patriots. Like, everybody's forgotten about Gibson for a good reason. He's not a great running back. And Gibson was taking touches from Stevenson, so I think Henderson for sure is going to take over. I agree with everything you said. We'll move on to the next battle here. Another Patriots discussion. This one is for the wide receivers, though. At the disposal of Drake May, who I expect a big, somewhat of a breakout season from Drake May with the new coaching staff and the ability that I think Drake May has. But who's he going to throw the rock to, Genoa? I'll pose it to you.
Justin, actually, I'm still a believer in Demario Douglas. I know it wasn't last year, but I want to say it was Mac Jones's final year in New England. I think that Demario Douglas showed some promise, and I'm going to go with Demario Douglas. Looking at these other guys, I'm not. The thing is, I think Drake May is being just a little bit over pushed. I think that with Diggs being there, I think that there's going to be this sense of feeling for I think Drake May is going to feel forced to throw the ball to Stephon Diggs, and it might not come organically. It might not come naturally. I love me some Stephon Diggs, but there are times where, he could be a little bit of a diva, a little bit of a pushover. And I do like, was it Keyshawn Butte, I think?
Yeah,
Just yeah, I love me these LSU receivers. Every now and then, even if they're not a first rounder, they still show some promise. And even for like Kyle Williams, I think that he could also be really good. And don't forget about Jalen Polk. I'm not sure if he's still there. I think he is really down in the depth chart as what I'm looking at here in all these reports. I do like Demario Douglas there, Justin, to be the number one guy. He's going to be this sneaky guy that, a lot of people are not drafting, obviously, but like week 3 or week 4, he's another waiver wire where, you might not have the first pick of that waiver wire week, but you can still get him if you're still 2-1, 3-0 or something. You can possibly get him there, Justin. It doesn't matter where that waiver order is. I don't think everybody's going to be rushing to get him, but once you get him, Justin, he's going to be a solid guy that you can start in the bye weeks, like I want to say week 5 to like week 10. He's a guy that you're going to be able to be plugging in and out in your lineup because I think that Drake May is going to be looking for him the most.
Yeah, I think this wide receiver room is a tough one to decipher for me. If you look at Douglas, I think that he could be that target hog, that short, intermediate passing route guy for Drake May. But 2 years he's battled through injuries and he hasn't been he's had a few games of production. I'll give him credit, and I think this is a new opportunity. I think this team, even though May was the quarterback ending last year, is the quarterback going into this year. I think this team is really different. I think this team's going to be very different. Their identity is going to be different. And when you look at Diggs coming off the ACL injury, honestly, there's a lot of positive reports that he's good to go and he's, has no limitations. I don't know why I'm still in my gut and feeling that there's something that's not going to, when he transitions to being on the field in pads against defenses, he's not going to be ready. That leg's not going to be ready. He's an older wide receiver. I just don't think that he's automatically ready to go. And then you look at Kyle Williams, who actually has gotten also a lot of positive reviews, and I think that he is the guy I might be betting on this year to have the biggest role out of the wide receivers. Out of Washington State, he's a really good player, and he's already had some highlight reel plays in training camp. And you look at Douglas, who I just talked about, and Butte, who I think is actually really under the radar, currently going at wide receiver 101, but he led the Patriots in snaps and snap percentage last year. Like, he was their wide receiver 1, surprisingly enough. I know the Patriots sucked, and there was nobody to have, and even Butte probably wasn't a guy you wanted to roster, but he was the guy last year. And you're right, LSU prodigy or pedigree, so maybe he has something that we're missing. I feel like nobody's talking about him, and I think he maybe is worth maybe best ball or DraftKings guy until he breaks out. Then he might be worth something later. Not somebody you're going to draft, but if I had to pick from the top 2 guys that are actually getting drafted, I'd probably wait and go Kyle Williams. So that's my take there on the Patriots wide receivers. We'll move to the Minnesota running backs here. And this one, I think, if we pick correctly, could be a really solid RB1 or high-end RB2 in fantasy football this year. I'll throw it to you, though. What do you think about these 2 guys?
As we go on, Justin, year by year, I have less faith in Aaron Jones. I just feel like, I think he's done enough for his career. And I'm going to go with Jordan Mason. I think for me, it's a little bit of like a no-brainer. I know it's kind of crazy to say because Aaron Jones was once a star in Green Bay, and Jordan Mason really hasn't, done really anything outside of some good games last year for filling in for Christian McCaffrey, well, most of the year, actually. I'm going to go with Jordan Mason. I think he's got more fresh legs. Not to mention that, once you go through a Shanahan kind of running back system, and you go somewhere else, I think that you can shine. Like I feel like you learn more, right, Justin? And I feel like you go to Minnesota, which is another great system with Kevin O'Connell, and I feel like I think that it's going to be really good. I think that there's going to be some times where Jordan Mason is going to shine. Like I feel like if they go to Lambeau, right, Justin, and it's really cold or something like that, I feel like you're going to have to lean on Jordan Mason more than Aaron Jones. I feel like the miles and the mileage is going to like kind of add up to Aaron Jones, and I feel like there could be some times where he might miss games. Like that's been his thing in Green Bay, where he was really good, right? But then he'd go and he'd go and miss 4 or 5 weeks. I think 2 years ago, right, Justin? He missed like most of the season. Like I want to say it was like week 1 and week 2 he played. Yeah, 3 years ago. I think it was Rodgers' last year. Like he played like week 1 and week 2, and then you didn't hear from him again until like week 15 or 16. He's like, oh, okay, he's back. But I like Jordan Mason. I think I like what I saw out of him in San Francisco. I think he'll end up being the guy.
You couldn't have said it better, or I couldn't have said it better because I agree with everything you said. I think that Jordan Mason is the more explosive running back. I think that he, in this offense, which is a great system to be in, you have a team that went out and added 3 starting offensive linemen. They added Will Freeze. They added Ryan Kelly, the center from the Colts, so 2 Colts starting O linemen, and Donovan Jackson in the first round of the draft. So they wanted to establish that. And the unfortunate thing is there's a chance that J.J. McCarthy maybe isn't ready yet. I do believe that he is a great talent, but maybe he's not ready, and the Vikings have to pivot to relying on the running game a little bit more because they don't want to have to, funnel through J.J. McCarthy every game, every week, a lot. Like, Michigan didn't do that when he was there because they had such a great rushing attack and a great defense. This could be the same story here where maybe McCarthy, I'm looking at him too high, and they decide to run the football a lot more, especially with the news. Jay Jettis is have a little bit of a hamstring issue. If that lingers and he's not there week 1 or week 2 or misses some time, they're going to have to run the ball a lot more. Same goes for Addison with his DUI issue. He could be suspended a couple of games. And so when maybe this team becomes a rush first team, which they weren't last year. And you're right, Aaron Jones always misses time. He did, though, play all 17 games last year. I'll give him credit, but he's going to be 31 into the season, during the season. And I think that Mason, who had a really good year in substitute for Christian McCaffrey, is in line to be a possible league winner, I think. Yeah. And if you look at, also, one last thing, if you look at how the Vikings ran their running back room last year, it was Aaron Jones as the primary guy. But then they went out and traded for Cam Akers, which was kind of a surprising move. And he was getting touches, honestly, in that backfield. And I think that's what they want. They want a 1A and 1B. And I think that Jordan Mason is much, much better than Cam Akers. And I think is a guy who will take over at some point in the year with Aaron Jones, whether it's by Jones getting injured or just Mason being the better running back. So I agree with you there. I think Mason is going to be the guy. Let's discuss another group of running backs in the New York Jets with Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis. Last year, obviously, Breece Hall was going as a top 3, top 4 pick in the NFL, in your fantasy football drafts. Did not return value, was still a top 20 running back, but was not what we expected him to be. But this year is a completely new New York Jets team. The only 2 guys that really are worth value that are still there is Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. But now you have these running backs, but you have Justin Fields at quarterback, so he's going to take some rushing attempts there. And Braylon Allen was able to take a good amount of touches, as well as Davis at the back half of last year. I'm really curious to see how you think this running back room is going to be. Is it going to be a committee? I'll discuss more as well with the offensive coordinator, but what do you think overall?
You know what, Justin? I'm still a big believer in Breece Hall. I feel like, there was, I think there was some time this week where they talked to Breece Hall, and he just pretty much said, like, I don't know if they want me here. I don't know if I'm their guy kind of thing. But he pretty much downplayed it. But I'm still a believer, Justin. I mean, I feel like last year was just a pretty weird year. And Justin, he's only still 24 years old, right? It was a weird season for New York. Once Devontae Adams got there, and they already had Garrett Wilson, I think they just shied away from running the football. Not to mention that they fired Robert Saleh like mid-year last season. So it was just different identities, different coordinators. And so it was pretty much like they kind of just abandoned the run game all as a whole. And it was just Rodgers, just throw. Because I remember Devontae Adams had a really good innings last year. Garrett Wilson also as well had a couple good games. So I don't think it had anything to do with Brees Hall and his talent. I just think it just had everything to do with the coaching staff and how they were calling offensive plays, right? They weren't really running the football. I feel like if they did, Brees Hall would have broke 1,000 yards. He did have only 876 rushing yards. And I feel like this year, if they just pound the rock and lean with him more, I think he will most definitely get 12 to 1,300 yards and about 8 or 9 touchdowns. I'm a big believer. Justin, he's 24, and he hasn't really had a major injury, anything like that. He's been somewhat consistent. And these other running backs, I think they will be good. However, there is a chance, Justin, that maybe the Jets trade Brees Hall. I have a feeling that they actually might, Justin. It's just the ultimate New York Jet thing to do, right, Justin? Like, they got Justin Fields, they got Garrett Wilson, and it looks cool when you have Brees Hall in the backfield. But, like, hey, let's just trade Brees Hall because that's the Jets. That's just kind of what they do, Justin. They're kind of like the mess everything up kind of franchise. Like, we got it going here, but let's just mess it up. Let's just mess it up, blah, blah, blah. Let's just do it. And I feel like that's something that the Jets might do, and I'm really concerned that they might go that route. I do like Braylon Allen. I like I mentioned, we talked off air. I love he had a really good game last year. I think it was at Tennessee where he had like 2 receiving touchdowns. And as far as Isaiah, his name is Isaiah Davis, right? I haven't really heard much of this guy. I think that he really won't have much in this offense. It all depends on Brees Hall, right? Now, if Brees Hall does get traded, I actually like Isaiah Davis to be like the workhorse back, while Braylon Allen becomes like kind of the receiving kind of guy. And he's there for third down situations. But if Brees Hall's healthy and he's there all year and this contract situation doesn't loom this Jets team all year, I love Brees Hall to be the leading back, no doubt about it. 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's a guy that next year, if he does get paid, he's a guy that kind of goes back to, like you mentioned, he's being a top 3 to 4 pick in 2026. So I'm going to stay with Brees Hall. I'm going to stick with him. He's 24, no major injuries. He does have big play potential. He's a power back. He can get you receiving touchdowns. He can break 1,000 yards easy. So I'm sticking with Brees Hall.
When thinking about this, there's a couple things I'd like to discuss with Brees. He did have, his rookie year, he did have that torn ACL. That was tough. But now he's 2 years removed. He's 2 years removed from it, which is he should be 100%. And with Braylon Allen, though, I was listening to Tanner Angstrand, the new offensive coordinator for the Jets, talk about this running back room. Obviously, Angstrand was the passing game coordinator for the Lions last year and the last couple of years. So he was Ben Johnson's kind of second in command in that offense. So I think that he's going to want to employ something similar to that. And he even spoke on it, saying Brees Hall could kind of be the Jahmyr Gibbs, and Braylon Allen could be the Montgomery, because Braylon Allen is huge, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, Derrick Henry is 6'2", 250. Braylon Allen is 6'1", 235, so he's a little bit smaller, but that is a huge running back. I mean, Brees Hall is, I think, 215. So, like, Braylon Allen is a much bigger running back. I included Isaiah Davis on here because he did have some flashes last year. He's a super speedy back. I think he's solid, but I do think that the Jets are going to want to focus on the 2 running back committee, and Davis will be there if an injury were to occur to one of the backs. But I think Brees Hall, where he's going right now, I think it's a solid price tag. But Braylon Allen, to me, is a big value right now, going in the 13th and 14th rounds, not really being discussed. I feel like a guy in a similar position to him, and Roschon Johnson is the guy being talked about as a goal line back who could take a ton of touchdowns. I think that could be Braylon Allen, and in an offense where I think they have improved their O-line. They have now 3 first-round picks on that O-line as well as a second-round pick. So I think Braylon Allen is a undervalued pick. Somebody going very under the radar. Where Hall, I think, is a solid spot. I haven't really taken him in much of my fantasy drafts, but we'll see as we get closer to the season starting how this backfield kind of breaks out. But it is a tougher one to cipher through. While I do think Allen will be a underrated piece. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers with Caleb Johnson, rookie, was he a 3rd-round pick, and Jaylen Warren, who was a restricted free agent, rejoins the team. And then you have Kenny Gainwell, Super Bowl champion Kenny Gainwell, coming from Philadelphia. What do you think about these 3 guys?
Well, first things first, I'm not really too worried about Kenneth Gainwell there. And it's really down to Caleb Johnson and Jaylen Warren. I'm going to actually stick with Jaylen Warren there. I feel like, he's actually been really good in the receiving, out of the backfield there. And I feel like Caleb Johnson does have potential I don't think he breaks 1,000 yards, Justin. I think at some point he does kind of become the RB1 for Pittsburgh, but I think he's gonna really, really struggle just a little bit. I don't think he breaks 1,000 yards. If I had to predict his like final stats at the end of the year, maybe like 700 yards rushing and maybe like 5 or 6 touchdowns, and that's really just the max for me. I'm not all in on Caleb Johnson. Maybe I got to see a little bit more to buy in. I'm going to stick with Jalen Warren just because he's more of a familiar face. I know I talked to some people last year who had Najee Harris. They were very frustrated with the fact that Jalen Warren, they actually thought, when I talked to them, they actually thought that Jalen Warren was the more talented back than Najee Harris. And they sort of were like, dang, maybe I should have just waited and drafted Jalen Warren, or maybe I should have just, got him in the waiver wire as soon as the draft was over. And so, I think that Jalen Warren still has potential. Now, can he get 1,000 yards? I don't know. But I think he can end up with really good PPR fantasy scoring. Like maybe he can end up with 5 or 6 catches, right? 45 yards, maybe a receiving touchdown. Maybe he gets you about 32, 35 rushing yards. You add that all together and he gets you nearly like 20 fantasy points, something like that. So he's a guy that he can be a really good flex if you have receivers that you're not really trusting or anything. Like the matchups get like, let's say the Steelers, they play Cleveland twice this year, right? So if you have a bye week or something and they're in Cleveland and you're feeling good about Jalen Warren, like that is the time that you're really feeling good about Jalen Warren. He is a good bye week filler in, right, Justin? If you're maybe you drafted 2 RBs that have the same bye week, right? You're 2 studs at running back, and you have Jalen Warren there. Then he's a guy that's like perfect fill in there for them. You can start him and feel really confident. I'm not really excited about this backfield overall. I don't know how much points this offense is going to score. You got old man Rodgers there. You got DK Metcalf. You don't have George Pickens anymore. You got 2 solid tight ends, but I really don't know what to expect out of Pittsburgh. They're going to win 8 or 9 games, but are they going to do it by their offense? I think it's going to be more so their defense.
Yeah, I'm going to take somewhat of a contrary opinion to yours. I did include Kenny Gainwell as more of a cameo, like, oh my God, he's actually on the Steelers. Like, that's a little silly. Same with Trey Sermon is on the Steelers, it seems. So
wow.
They have a couple of faces that you're like, oh my God, yeah, I forgot he still plays football. But anyway, moving to the main 2 with Warren and Johnson. With Warren, I think that he is very good in the role that he's played the last 2-3 years on the team. I think that he's going to stay in that role. I think that Caleb Johnson is more of just the replacement for Najee Harris, and Warren, who, if you look at it, because I was curious, did the Steelers really make that effort to go and bring him back and to go and be like, oh, Warren, I think this is the year he could take that step? That's not what happened. They waited over a month to bring him back after free agency started, so there wasn't a ton of eyeballs going at Jalen Warren in free agency from other teams because he was a restricted free agent. So, he could have gotten offered by any team and the Steelers would have to match him. That didn't really happen too much, obviously, unless it was something not reported, but they waited a long time to bring Warren back. And I just don't think that he is the guy to take that step forward. And I think it is Caleb Johnson. And I've been really high on him this offseason. He's looked really good in training camp so far. And if you look at Aaron Rodgers, he has supported a top 17 running back in points per game in 8 seasons. So he has been there to get his running backs the ball. I know he's a pass first guy, and we saw Breece Hall struggle somewhat last year, but he was still the RB 17. So he was still a top 20 back. And I think Caleb Johnson, who in his last year at Iowa, which is he's playing in the Big Ten, the second, or you could argue first best conference in college football. I'll go second, being an Aggie. He was able to have 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns. So he has that workhorse back mentality, has the capabilities to do so. And with the Steelers, you're right. To me, their passing game this year is kind of subpar. They traded for Jonnu and they traded for DK and they brought in Aaron Rodgers. But I think that they're going to realize, okay, our defense is really, really good. We traded for Ramsey. We have TJ Watt. We always have a really good defense. And Aaron Rodgers is a little old, and I don't think we're going to be a team that wants to throw the rock a lot, especially having plays being called by Arthur Smith. He loves to run the football.
Yeah.
So I like Caleb Johnson to be the guy. Now, the one tiny little bit of doubt that just holds in my mind is something that me and you have discussed and have struggled through. It was 2 years ago when Arthur Smith was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, and he also had a rookie running back that there was a lot of promise for, and didn't utilize him in the ways we wanted to. Now, I know Tyler Algier was a very good, workhorse running back, a guy that can get the ball on first and second down. And for some reason, he decided to trust Algier over Bijan Robinson. Now, if that happens again, I don't want to be bit in the butt twice by Arthur Smith. I literally might start a petition to get him fired if that happens.
You can't
But I
trust him.
do really like the talent. That's tough because I mean I have PTSD thinking about Arthur Smith right now. But I do believe in Caleb Johnson's talent. Um, so I'm going to pick him, but there is some doubts with the way the offense is run, as well as Jalen Warren will have a presence there, and he will be the receiving back. So Caleb Johnson, if you want to rely on him in fantasy, he's probably going to have to come on the ground instead of the passing game. So I can see the doubt there. But I will go Caleb Johnson. You like Warren a bit more. We'll move to our last discussion in the training camp battles, and it is the wide receiver room for the Green Bay Packers. It's deep. But is there an alpha wide receiver that can really take claim as the number one guy for Jordan Love in fantasy football and as for the Packers moving forward? What do you think about this entire wide receiver room?
Justin, first off, I want to say Jordan Love is moving him on my rankings as far as quarterbacks. When we do talk about him, I didn't put him in my top 10, Justin. We talked about it, but I kind of want to put him in my top 10 because look at these targets. Matt Golden. I love Matt Golden. I'm a UT guy. I love my Longhorns. Jaden Reed is still really good in my opinion. And Romeo Dobbs, man, this guy's a reception magnet. And then obviously McCall Harmon, who was really good in Kansas City. Can he, show up and be the old, rookie year Kansas City McCall Harmon? I think he could. And then Dontavian Wicks. No one talks about this. No one talks about Dontavian Wicks. He is really, really good. Not to mention Christian Watson at some point will possibly be back, maybe like week 10-ish. And then you still got Tucker Kraft, who's at the time of position, he's up and coming. And so, I mean, Justin, that is like, what is 7 really good, reliable options for Jordan Love. Not to mention, you got a great running game with Josh Jacobs in the backfield. I mean, I'm really loving this Green Bay Packers offense. To answer your question, though, Justin, I'm still a fan of Romeo Dobbs. He had some flashes last year. I know there was a little bit of a situation within the team last year, and I think he came out. I want to say it was in San Francisco and had like 2 or 3 touchdowns. Had a really big game at home. I'm still a believer. I think he's going to be more of a touchdown guy than a yards guy. I think Romeo Dobbs will probably end the year like maybe barely 500 yards, but then he'll get like 6 or 7 touchdowns and like 65 catches. You're like, oh wow, that's pretty good. But then Jaden Reed, I think he's going to lead the Packers in receiving yards. I think Golden, I think he's going to have a little bit of like a Keon Coleman kind of year. But I think it's a better finish for Matt Golden than it was for Keon Coleman, right? I don't know if that really makes sense. But he kind of reminds me a little bit of Keon Coleman, but just a little bit better. And Wicks too, like I think Wicks is going to have those couple games where he's like, you start Jaden Reed and he doesn't do nothing because Wicks has a big game. And so to answer your question, I'm going to go with Jaden Reed on this. But just know, Justin, I love Matt Golden. I love Romeo Dobbs. Romeo Dobbs is as deep of a sleeper as you can get. I mean, talk about steals. But you got to remember, Tucker Kraft is going to be a red zone magnet. Josh Jacobs in the red zone, he's going to be their goal line guy. So there's plenty of mouths to feed, more than people know it, Justin. But a lot of people are not talking about that Jordan Love has a ton of mouths to feed. And Justin, there's no excuse for Jordan Love to have a bad year. I want to at least see 35 passing touchdowns from Jordan Love, a little bit more. And I do like this receiving core, but to answer your question, I'm going to go with Jaden Reed.
Jaden Reed. You say you love Matt Golden, and I'm going to have to agree with you on that. I do love Matt Golden, and I want to give Dween Nation a kind of an inside scoop that I've been hearing from beat reporters about how it's looking so far in Packers training camp. And it's actually a surprising setup they're going with. They've been running a lot of 12-man personnel, which means 2 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. So you have Tucker Kraft on the field. You have Luke Musgrave on the field. But who are the 2 receivers they're running with so far in training camp? It's Romeo Dobbs and Matthew Golden have been the 2 guys, have been with the ones, have been leading the way. And my bet is that it's going to still end the season with Matt Golden being the number 1 guy and Jaden Reed being the number 2 guy. I do think the Romeo Dobbs issue last year where he was actually complaining about snaps and being included in the offense, I think it might still be a thing this year. I know after that, I guess maybe they put things aside and he did step up in that game against San Francisco and he had some good games further on. But I do think that the the speed that Golden and Reed offer is going to be something they really value, especially with having two slower wide receivers on the field and Kraft and Musgrave if they do a lot of 12-man personnel. So give me Golden as their guy. And I talked about this maybe in another episode before that Golden was a first-round draft pick by the Packers, and they haven't picked a wide receiver in the first round in 23 years. So they must really believe that this guy is their next alpha wide receiver one. And yes, you discussed it. They do have a really deep set of receivers, but none of them are stars. And I think that there's room for somebody to take up that mantle. And my pick is going to be Matthew Golden for this year. And I know it does hurt because he's a Texas Longhorn. I know he used to be also a Houston Cougar, so you double like him.
Yeah.
But I think that he's going to be their guy. And he really was. He was the leader for the team for the Longhorns last year, a team that almost made the national championship. I know they had Isaiah Bond there and Gunnar Helm, but Golden came in there as a guy from the Houston Cougars and became their star wide receiver. So I think that he's set up for success there, and I think they're going to try to make that happen. And as for Jordan Love, last thing to discuss with Jordan Love there, obviously I do, with all these targets, I do expect him to be better, especially much better than he was last year. But what sets the people ahead of him apart, Joe Burrow has Jamar Chase. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. Baker Mayfield has Mike Evans. Like, Bo Nix has Cortland Sutton. Like, they have alpha wide receivers that they can target. Now, I'm not going to include the Lamar Jacksons and Josh Allens and Jalen Hurtses and even Jaden Daniels because they offer so much with their legs, where Jordan Love is much more of a pocket passer. So I think Jordan Love, what's going to take him to that next level to be a top 10 quarterback, even top 8, is one of these guys becoming an alpha wide receiver for the team. And the bet I'll take this year is Matthew Golden. But yes, Dween Nation, those are our training camp battle discussions. Part 1, we had another episode, part 1. This is part 2. Watch both of them. Utilize the knowledge we are trying to give to you guys because it's going to help you in your fantasy drafts. So just keep sticking around because next week we have some big episodes. We have all our rankings that we're going to drop. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Then we'll dive into sleepers. We'll have another mock draft. We'll have bust talks, breakout talks, my guys and league winners before the season starts. So stay tuned because this is the biggest ramp up of the season where you're going to need the information to help you draft, and we're here to help. That's all we want to do. We love doing this. So thank you guys for watching to keep us around. But yes, thank you guys for watching. And Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dween Nation, this was part 2 of our training camp battles there. Go ahead, make sure to check out part 1 there. We're so excited for this 2025 season. I cannot stress that enough, man. This is going to be such a fun year with a ton of new talent there, a new era of quarterbacks there. And so thank you guys for watching, man. We love you, Dween Nation. And as always, peace.